is the NOC, and we are back. The Nerds of Color. I am your Babinka boy, your Ado bro, Kuyapi, aka Patrick Michael Strange, and I am back with another ShoPowSho with the amazing Ates, Mestizo Mafia in the house. What's up, y'all?
Hello. Super excited for today.
I know, right? We got an amazing group of podcasters from This Filipino American Life. I'd like to say that we'll hopefully be the East Coast version of them, but they are legends to us because they were already killing it, giving us the content that we were hoping to have, and now we're doing the same thing, and we hope we can follow in their footsteps. We have amazing guests. Why don't you speak on them right now, Kat and Tina? Who do we have?
Sure. We have Elaine Dolalas, who's a historic Filipinotown-based writer and a podcaster with this Filipino American Life, and an independent curator who's trying to figure out the secret of life through writing, volunteering, and most importantly, avoiding cleaning her room, which is quite a feat in COVID times.
And we also have Mike Nailat, who is a 100% Filipino American, educated at USC and UC Irvine, works during the day for United Way, but also helps guide Sessions LA, which is a DJ and music production program for the youth. Cool.
Dope. Super excited. So let's bring them on. Here we go. Producer Mike and Elaine Dolalas from This Filipino American Life. Hello, people. How are you guys?
Hey, what's up?
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for having us.
Super excited, man. And it's been a great weekend, as we talked about a little bit earlier. I've kind of heard, I guess, some of your views from watching your podcast. But it's a great weekend. There's hope for the future. So that I'll just leave it at that. But super excited you guys are here. Although we are kind of a little bit, sprung because we were partying all last night. So, but we'll try and keep the energy up because again, we're excited to have you all on. Thank you for joining us. So let's get into it. I'm gonna let Tina start off because she kind of sparks our initial interviews with the very first question out the gate. Hit him with it, Tina.
Where are you from? Where are your parents from?
You want to go first, Mike?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm making you go first.
I'm from Oxnard, Ventura County, Navy town. My dad was in the Navy. Both of my parents are originally from Iloilo, specifically Miagao, right dead center of the Philippines, I think. And so, coastal town, fishing village, that kind of thing. And so I guess it's appropriate that I grew up also in basically a beach town. So, and now here I am with Elaine here in Historic Filipinotown in LA. So
Nice.
Yeah, and I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, what we locally call the Valley. So when folks think of that, that's what we say. My parents are from Osama City in Mindanao. So, but I have the knowledge of the fact that of all my cousins, I'm the only one that's never been to the Philippines. So, I've never been. I'm born and raised here in California, and I didn't know anything about the military until I got with Mike, and all his entire upbringing sounds totally ass backwards. So.
it's just different. We're different.
It's different. But I've learned a lot, and since then, enjoyed the pleasures of the Navy exchange and commissary. So.
No, it's funny. Like my dad was texting me right before this, sending me like things on sale at the Navy exchange. Like, you want to get this GoPro or whatever? And I was like, yeah, of course I want that GoPro because no tax and all that. So
yeah. Yo, that's my parents too, straight up. They're like, hey, do you want anything from the commissary or the exchange? Yeah, still.
The answer is always yes.
Even though I serve too.
I'm not gonna say no.
I mean, even our Black Friday planning is like, did we go to the exchange this year? I know COVID and all, but
like how does
gotta get on that tax-free sales,
Hey,
are we good? Can I just tell you the first time I went? Not the first time, but there was a Black Friday, and Mike was like, "We gotta buy a TV," and then I thought we had to go to the electronics part of the Navy exchange, and he's like, "No, we have to get in line," and I'm like, in line in front of a truck, like literally the TVs come out of a truck. And I was like, it's not a metaphor. This is real life. The television is coming out of the trunk. It was
They're just
Yes.
working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, right. Why
yeah,
say
no. It's hilarious.
So let's talk about growing up as young Filipinos, Americans here in the States. We can totally relate with you, Elaine. Growing up in the States, I've never been to the Philippines. That's a goal of mine, is to visit our homeland at least once in my lifetime. So yeah, let's just talk about early, life as a kid, child, growing up, learning the differences or finding out that you were different and being raised in the States.
So it was funny, like I always grew up with my cousins around, so like most of my family, my mom's side is here, and we all lived within like a 5-mile radius in the San Fernando Valley. So I didn't experience a lot of culture shock of like not having my community, because I had like my 20 cousins around me all the time. But I will say in school, like before I went to St. Genevieve, which is this Catholic school in the Valley that everybody knows as a Filipino school, I went to I went to this other private school that was not Catholic, and it was mixed. So it was white kids, black kids, Latinx kids, and Asian kids. And I had culture shock when I went to St. Genevieve because everybody was Filipino. And I was just like, everybody here is either Filipino, El Salvadorian, or Mexican. And I remember I was just like, yeah, so my best friend, and do we celebrate Hanukkah here? And they were like, what's Hanukkah? And I literally was like, oh my God, what world have I come to? And I cried to my parents, and I was like, what have you done? I don't get to celebrate Hanukkah anymore, Mom. And she was looking at me like, we sent you to a Catholic school. Of course you're not going to celebrate Hanukkah anymore. You're not Jewish. And I'm like, but I want a dreidel filled with chocolate coins. This is what I'm used to. How dare you take me out of this environment? And they're like, get used to it. You're going to this crappy Catholic school for the rest of your life. So that was my like, my childhood. I totally have that Catholic school upbringing, but I then proceeded to rebel against, and that's just how it is.
Okay.
I mean, like when I was growing up, and in this complete opposite experience, I think of Elaine, is like I didn't have a lot of family around me because, like I was in a Navy town, and like all my cousins and relatives and uncles and aunties were like not related. They were just like military uncles or military cousins. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I didn't really get to know like blood family until like I was a little bit older, and most of them lived in other parts of California, like Long Beach, San Diego, San Francisco, and so. I mean, I'm just used to like everybody being a cousin or uncle or auntie, because just like, oh, well, because they're Filipino, my parents play mahjong with them, on the weekends. And so that's my family. And so like in Oxnard and Ventura County, I mean, it's actually pretty diverse. It's a farming town right by the ocean. And so, but I didn't grow up with necessarily like I didn't go to school with a lot of Filipinos. I didn't really, get a sense of like Filipino culture beyond like who I called family, and like until I got to college, and I think and went to UC Irvine with Elaine, and that's where I got a lot of culture shock about what Filipino Americanness was for different folks from different parts of the country. So
awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
So growing up then, so now, and where would you say you started then to just like want to celebrate your culture? Well, was it in college, I guess, is like you said, Mike, is when you like really dived into it? And
I mean, the ironic thing was it was maybe like, yeah, the ironic thing was so yeah, once I went to UC Irvine, and I didn't realize this until I was there, that it is basically like the Filipino capital of like the UC University of California schools. Because Cabo Modern's from there, Cabo Bayan, which is the Filipino organization.
How dare you talk about it, Mike? You weren't even a part of it. And
I wasn't a part of any of that stuff. I mean, I didn't really get into it until after college, but when I was in college, I think there was just so many Filipinos, it was kind of overwhelming for me. And I was like, man, I don't know if I want to deal with all this, because a lot of people just reminded me of like my knucklehead cousins that kind of were annoying to me.
Yeah.
It's like I don't have like a Rice Rocket car, and I don't break dance, and I don't DJ. Well, I DJ'd, but I mean, but I was just like, man, I want to be different. So I hung out with like other folks, and I hung out with like other Asian Americans. But it wasn't until like after college, and I ended up working in the Filipino community at a place called Search to Involve Filipino Americans, that I really kind of got into it. So I think like yeah, Elaine had another completely different experience, but I don't think I really understood Filipino Americanness as much as I do now until like I started to work actually in the community. So
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of had that same sentiment as Mike. Like when I went to college, I was like, I came from the Filipino high school. I don't need to do any of this Filipino shit. Like I was like, but why? But I was a freshman and I'm trying to make friends beyond my dorm. So I went to student organization like club meetings, and like Cabo was one of them. UC Irvine Kababayan. It's the Filipino American organization at that campus. It's one of the biggest orgs there. And like when I was there were 500 kids in it, and like, you know, like PCN is a production and you had to limit yourself to be cultural night, like you could only be in like 2 suites at the max. And it's hilarious because like you had to limit yourself. Meanwhile, like Joe, our podcast partner at UC Santa Barbara, like they didn't have enough people in their club, so they had to do all 10 suites, or the heck, all dance suites, you know. And so it was just interesting because I wanted to make friends, and so I did the club. But at the same token, I was like, I don't want to be pigeonholed in being Filipino. Yeah. So I did. I joined APSA, the Asian Pacific Student Association, and like I made a lot of like Pan Asian friends. And so like the homies I kicked it with that weren't Cabo related were like Vietnamese, Taiwanese, Japanese American, and we all kicked it. And like our common bond was that we were in college and we like to drink and smoke weed. And so like that is just how life is.
And drink boba and like, yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, you were on the board for Cabo like 2-3 years in a row. So I mean you were like the Filipino like advocacy representative at the school.
It was like later on as I get older, and then like I became an Asian American Studies major, and then I was just like, oh, I care about the community, so I was a community advocacy coordinator. So like my primary role was to make sure there were community events, like volunteer events, or like encouraging folks to go to the Justice for Filipino American Veterans March, or like doing like canned good or food rally, like we would do like those type of campaigns so that we would donate it to the vets, Filipino American vets. So it was just like that was where my wheelhouse is and my passion in the community. And then I later was like the external VP, which is just basically like community but higher up the chain. And then I was just like, screw this shit, I'm tired, and then I didn't want to do anything. But after college, moved back to LA, and then it was just like, oh, the community I found in LA was through organizing. So there's a nonprofit called Filipino Philam Arts, and they produce the Festival of Philippine Arts and Culture. And there's a group of women there that took me under their wing. And if it wasn't for Allison Dela Cruz, who is a performance artist and organizer, who tapped me to be the ticket coordinator in like 2003 or 4, I would never have gotten sucked into this community life and found my family. But like at the end of the day, those women are my family, and we're always there for each other. And I may not be a part of the organization anymore, but like I'm always gonna love it, and I'm gonna love the people that came. Like we literally have like a chosen fam like thread, and like when we have Christmas and whatnot, like it's a must for us to always be together, all the things. So
yeah, I think that's the important part, is like we've got pulled into the Filipino American community not because like we had specific roles that we had in mind. It's just the family part of it, right? Like she mentioned Elaine mentioned Justice for Filipino American Veterans, and when I was in college, that was like the one thing that actually pulled me in was my grandpa served in World War II. He was in the Bataan Death March. My dad is in the Navy, and then like when I heard about what was happening with Filipino American veterans, which I didn't know until college, it's just like, what the hell is that all about? Like they did their time, they served, like they sacrificed for this country, and I was like, beyond kind of just like the Filipino identity politics of it, was just this idea of like justice for the people who sacrifice the most for us to have our lives. And so, and I met people along the way in getting involved in that campaign, just like Elaine met a lot of people in getting involved with like, arts and culture in our community. And I think because we made those connections with people who we may not have been from the same province or the same towns, but just like that idea that, this is part of our identity and being Filipino and Filipino American that we connected on, that just pulled us into kind of like the causes and issues, and really ended up us getting into like what became this Filipino American Life podcast. So
yeah Yeah, like with the veterans, like I was involved in those things because like my grand uncle was a vet, and like he was in a concentration camp. And like I always have this story, like I have one grand uncle on my mom's side and then a grand uncle on my dad's side, and they were in the camp together. And
Wow.
so like my grand uncle on my dad's side actually fed him banana leaves or banana peels to survive in the death camp. And so like I was just to know that like my two families' destinies were somehow tied even then. And then like to be in America and then like to see this campaign, I was like, I have to do this. Like I have to march for my Lolo. Like this is our struggle. And I gotta like, you know, they didn't get acknowledgement for like so long, and like they barely gave them anything. And so it's just like, you know, they gave them gout and like high blood pressure. I don't know. So you know, those are the, I feel like with Mike and I, like that's our common bond. And like with Joe and Ryan in our podcast, like they've all done like similar work and like help facilitate a lot of the things that we've done in the city in Los Angeles, because like at the time Joe had worked for City Council District 13, which is where like the Veterans March would take place, and so he would be able to get permits and whatnot. And then later on Ryan had taken over that same job, and so and I've known Ryan since I was 16 years old. Like we have been friends since so long. And so I would be like, bro, like you have to help me. We need to figure this out. And he would just help. He would work his magic in the city, and it would always work.
I love it. I'm just so jealous because for me, and I'll let Kat and Tina speak for themselves. For when we started to put together this podcast, we, you know, COVID situation, you know, COVID, you know, really kind of put all of us and made us concentrate on other things because you really couldn't go anywhere, do anything. And myself and Kat and Tina, we're very much involved with the convention world around here. And we participate in a lot of conventions, hosting, running panels. And now with, you know, kind of, you know, as the months went by, getting inspired to create again for different reasons. I wanted to do a podcast that I've been meaning to do for a long time, which was this podcast to, you know, focus on my people and our culture. And that's kind of how I gained wind of you all and started checking that out. And that was inspiring. But for me as a Filipino, being a Filipino American, you know, being raised in the States, not learning my culture, and I had to seek it out. I was involved with some Filipino groups, but, you know, it was only being a military kid. I was only there for like, you know, 4 years or maybe 3 years there. And then you're going to the next place, you know, it's 4 years here, 4 years there. And so I had to seek information out to learn about my people. And I'm so jealous of y'all West Coast cats, because especially in the Bay, the community's so large there, you have no choice. It's there. It's in your face. So for us, you know, another reason why we do this podcast is to learn about our culture, and having you guys on and hearing your stories is wonderful. But I just wanted to add that. Kat and Tina, if you wanted to, you know, as well, speak.
Yeah. It's just been really cool. Even, I mean, this is what, our sixth episode, but just exploring like the different places that we are in culture, Filipinos, and like, and talking to people that have been doing big things. And it's always been like a sense of pride. It's like, oh, like, you know, I'm doing my thing. And then you see someone, you're like, oh, you're Filipino. Like I always feel like, hey, that person's like family in some way to me, just because we're Filipino. But then like growing up, sometimes like I didn't always feel that way because I'm mixed. So it's like, you know, am I an authentic Filipino American? And like I have Filipino family here on the East Coast, but like my cousins and all my aunts and uncles, they're all in the Bay Area. So like to me, like going to California is like going to the Philippines for me, because that's where like I'm getting my Filipino family experience. So I want to come visit y'all.
Do it. We'll take you to all the fun places. Hopefully they'll still exist post-COVID. Yeah. I mean, we always say it, like we our podcast fully acknowledges our Los Angeles privilege. Like, no doubt, we are very, very lucky. Like, there are some folks out there who don't have that experience, and unlike when we get feedback from like places like Arkansas or Wyoming or something like that, like I will never know what that experience is like, right? Like, that is a whole nother world. And it's not like I haven't felt disenfranchised or been in like a predominantly white experience, because like, duh, I've worked professional. That's just gonna be how it is when you're in an office situation. You know, you learn to code switch or you don't, and then you like end up quitting in a blaze of glory, like that woman on Walmart who like went off on TikTok. Have you all seen that? Oh my God, it's amazing. It's this Filipino woman. She went off on TikTok. She like filmed herself she pulled like a half baked, like, fuck you. Fuck you.
Wow.
But she was on the PA system at Walmart saying, I just want to say, and she named names like, you're a racist, you're racist. This company fires black people for no reason.
Oh my God, I love this.
Fuck you, blah, blah, blah. And then she names some folks and she's like, y'all are cool. Thanks for hooking me up with this job when I needed it a year ago, but fuck you, I quit. And then she hangs up and I'm like, holy crap, that went on the PA system at a Walmart. Like, that was amazing.
Good for her, yeah.
I just did a quick search. I'm gonna watch this after we're done. Wow.
Oh, it's great. And then it's funny because on her TikTok, she's like, my mom wanted me to tell everybody that she didn't teach me how to curse this way, but she taught me to stick up for myself. I'm like, you have a Filipino mom. Or something. I was just like, oh my God. It's on days I sent it to a bunch of my girlfriends, and I'm like, I wish I could do this.
Our fantasy,
Right.
So one of the things I want to know, so okay, when did you all decide to put this podcast together? How did that create? Like, we want to learn from you as your co-highs. You are a senpai. Tell us how it all came, so we can learn. How do you make the goodness that you do? I'm just enamored because you guys cover some amazing topics, like your recent one about dancing, you know, in the community and the dance culture. And then there's one about gang culture that I know I was a little knucklehead before I joined the military. And, you know, I dabbled in that, you know, young Filipinos, you know how we roll.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, just again, how y'all, you know, you decided to come up with a podcast, just the ins and outs and that.
Well, like, to be honest, it's not us. The whole idea for this happened in 2016. Joe Bernardo, who has a PhD in history, he wanted to figure out a way to still teach but not teach, because he was like, I'm not going to join the ivory tower academic institution. And he was like, what should I do? And I straight up was like, just write a blog. You wrote a fucking dissertation, like, just do what everybody else does. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he didn't do that. But at the time, he worked with Ryan at the mayor's office for the city of Los Angeles. And so they were like, you know, in the same office, always shooting the shit, like talking. And they're like, hey, you know, like, we should record these conversations and like have a podcast. So it's just the two of them. And then Joe reached out to me because at the time I had like tried and failed to do podcasts because it was just me. I was solo. I had one that was called Oblivious Nerd Girl's Great Idea, where I reread Babysitter's Club and attempted to recap them from an adult perspective.
Oh my God.
That sounds cool. I ain't gonna lie.
It was fun. It takes a lot of work because you have to read these books and then you have to think about it, all these things. And then I just gave up because like, ugh. And plus I was by myself because like I was the only one reading them. So I just like, I let that go. And then I did one called Lessons from Lola, which is me interviewing my family and then like documenting our oral histories with my grandmother, because I wanted like my nieces and nephews to have that because they never got to meet her. So I did that. And then I just like stopped. But then Joe reached out and he was like, hey, we need a girl. It was really what it was like, we need a woman's perspective. I was like, sure, okay. Like I totally loved it because like I like the idea that he was talking about Filipino American experience and how it's not a monolith. And then I was just like, oh, and I will finagle Mike into doing it because he has all this equipment. Because no joke, like legit, that's what it was. Yeah. Because when I did my podcast, I straight up just did it on an iPad mini in GarageBand. Sound quality was terrible. I didn't give a shit. I was was just like, whatever. And Mike was like, you should get this. And then he went out and bought a board. And I was like, I'm never going to use that. But like, sure, have fun owning this board with like multi-tracks. And then Mike was like, oh, when I brought up the idea that Joe had, he was like, oh, well, I have this board and you all need these microphones and blah, 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 blah. And then it really went from there. Like Mike ended up dictating all the tech needs that we needed. And we personally invested like, okay, we need these mics, we need these stands, we need this, we need that, we need these cables. And that is how the show came to be. And we would record out of Berlato Studios, which is Joe's house. And we would come there and we would have like, we would talk story. And plus we would always do it like one Sunday a month. And it would be when Joe was doing food prep. So like we were always guaranteed a meal. And so it was the best. And like our guests, when we could have guests, would then get a meal. Like that would be our thing. Like we didn't know
the most Filipino thing ever, right? We're gonna feed
that would be our sell. Like, hey, do you want to be a guest? You have to go all the way out to the valley. I'm sorry. But we'll feed you. Joe makes home cooking. And so that was how we got guests to come out and see us. And it's funny because some days Joe would be like, I don't have time to cook. Can you guys bring potluck? And so it's literally, we'll go to like whatever place and like bring in food. But like, that is the creation and the origin story for the show. And then like, because there's 4 of us and we have like different wheelhouses, we then get to curate our topics based on each person. So Joe gets to do like, Joe does more academic stuff because he's an academic. He's a nerd, right? But he's like a nerd in the like textbook school type of way. Ryan's the wild card in that he will throw out really random things. Like the dance episode is actually Ryan's episode because he knows Lorenzo, like because he went to Berkeley with Lorenzo, so he knew it, so he brings it in. But then Ryan also like plays poker, and so that was when we had a professional poker player on because Ryan
the gambling episode
randomly met him. It's not gambling according to Ryan, it's professional poker. I was just like, whatever. And then I consider myself a nerd, like a really big nerd. I mean, I have Snorlax as my background, and I'm wearing a Baby Yoda shirt. And so like I'm a pop culture nerd. I fully acknowledge it. Like I own it. I love going to Comic Cons, all this type of stuff. But I also like I like wrestling, and I got back into wrestling, and I made Mike go to wrestling shows, and he was forced to see all these things. But you know, it was fun at the time. And then
usually it's like music or like politics. I mean, I'm also kind of interested in a lot of random things, but I mean, I don't think we've done like an anime episode. We need to do that. But usually it's just like bands, things that I like in terms of like, you know, Filipino music coming out of the Philippines. Sometimes it's community issues like the veterans issues. Kind of all over the map, but you know, we all the best thing about the podcast is because we all have those different perspectives is that like we're not short for ideas. And the other thing is like sometimes we try to keep up with what's happening in the community, but sometimes we're just like, well, no one's ever talked about this thing about our community. Like we'll just have the random thing about like the one we just released recently was about just Filipino sense of humor and like where does that come from? And we didn't really do a lot of research, or you know, we kind of just talked about like, you know, what are the kind of jokes that you grew up with? Like what do Filipino jokes just sound like dad jokes? You know, like why do we think that's so hilarious? And just like for about an hour just talked about kind of like the jokes that like our family members or uncles or whatever would tell, and you know, Filipino comedians. And I mean, I think like there's just so much to our community that you could just like pull something out of a hat almost and just be like, yo, I bet you there's not a single podcast, essay, article about this topic, because you know, we're still kind of as a culture and community really kind of digging into like what is a Filipino American. And there's so much to that you know, I mean, you guys are not going to run out of ideas because you know, every time we just sit down and be like, what are we gonna talk about next? Like, yo, nobody's talked about you know, like this specific topic, you know.
It's funny when we don't have ideas, all we do we do pull this thing called half-baked ideas, like because like we're Filipino,
the Hill Power episodes,
there's always like some like really random half-baked idea that like, and we say half-baked because we we're not really like business people who can manifest it and push it all the way through. So we like put the idea out there, and then we like my half making idea recently was like, I'm pretty sure I said this on the podcast, was like, because it's COVID times, you know, those Mama Mary water statues,
Mhm.
you put hand sanitizer in that,
Mm.
and then you bless it. And you know how much money you would make off of that? Those Mama Mary statues, instead of water from Our Lady of Fatima or Lady of Lourdes, you
You
put
about that
hand,
hustle. You about that
and then
hustle.
you have some priest bless that. You would sell it for $5. People would buy it. They'd be like, Tita, do you have hand sanitizer? Boom! I give you my Mama Mary.
Yo.
And then you open the crown, and then you put a little in
Oh
your
my
hand.
God.
And then you like go like this, and then it's like, oh, my hands are clean and they're blessed.
Clean and holy. I love it.
So
I want this to happen so bad, but like, duh, it's Hilapa. How would I even do this? It's probably sacrilegious. Like, like no priest is gonna say yes to this.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, there we go. Oh man.
That's super cool. So wow, because like I feel like when I watch you guys, like you guys have certain topics you're covering, whereas we've just kind of launched, and I've been just booking guests. Like, hey, I can get this person, I can get that person, but at some point I would like for us to like tailor the conversation to hit certain topics. And one of the things that Kat and Tina and I really want to do is bring like some Filipino historians on and talk about the mythology. Was another conversation we had, like the Swang projects and learning about that. And I reached out recently to Budget Tan, who has Trece coming out on Netflix. And so we could, get some of that Filipino mythology things going on. So just, I love what you guys are doing, and just how you approach certain topics, like the gang episode that I brought up earlier that you guys did. Whose idea was that? Was that you, Mike? Because I think you had that wonderful story where the one where you guys were just kind of chilling outside, and then somebody came out and was like a BB gun.
Oh no!
Who's that?
BB gun.
Was that me or was that Ryan?
No.
It might have been Ryan.
But I mean,
But-
like, so I mean, just to like, when we think about topics like that, for example, I mean, like, what we started with was like, what do we all kind of know about? And I mean, growing in Southern California, like Filipino gangs and Filipino party crews and all these other things were kind of just part of the culture. And like, you would never think that like, oh, this could be an entire kind of like, history exploration / academic kind of, study. But I mean, that's kind of part of why we do the podcast, right? Is because like there's things that like are authentic to the experience that we have. Like there's got to be stories that you guys have, and this is the thing that we're actually really curious about on our podcast, is the experiences of other Filipinos in other parts of the country. Like I don't know that East Coast story, like when we had like Eugene Cordero on, who's in The Mandalorian and like The Good Place. The thing that we picked up on in that conversation was the fact that he grew up in the Midwest, and in the Midwest, Filipinos have basements, and it's like, what? There's no basements in like the West Coast. Like nobody has a basement. It's like, what do you do in a basement? And like, it's the stupidest thing, right? But it was just like the entire episode was basically called like Filipino Basements with Eugene Cordero.
No, I love how you said that. I was immediately going, and he had to sell oranges in the wintertime.
Yeah, like there's like, the fundraisers for like Filipino groups out there was like selling oranges. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we sell world's finest chocolate out here. But I mean, like, and it seems dumb, right? But like even like the Filipino gangs episode and kind of the stories that we're telling about that, like that's the very like Southern California kind of understanding what Filipino gangs meant, to like our communities. And I'm curious to see like, what is the Filipino gang experience out on other parts of the country? Because ours is very much like connected to like specific kind of like Southern California, identifiers and experiences. And so, we'll speak from kind of like what is our connection to our understanding of this one topic. But I'm so curious to hear like even the things that we've covered on our show, like what does that look like through the lens of folks in other parts of the world,
Okay.
And that's an early episode, right? Like that's like episode 3 or whatever. And when we were starting, we have a big network like where we could talk to like randos now. But at the time we were like, we're gonna book all our friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hit up the homies and have them on the mic. And
Like,
that's the show.
so the
you know?
first episode is Joel and Glenda, and they're our friends. They are talking about parents. Dave, the person on the gang episode, is a friend. So we literally, and we've known Dave for so long and knew his experience. And like, I personally was like, let's just have Dave on. He could talk about what he did when he was like a kid, and then he could he could just be Dave, because we just know Dave. And so. And the funny thing is, Dave is not the only gangster we probably could have asked to be on the show. But he was just the one that was most willing to talk. And he's like old enough to know like how to talk about the situation. Because like I actually, when we were going to cover gangs, I wanted to talk to like these guys who helped with Crooks and Castles, the streetwear brand, because they originally are from like a Filipino American gang background, and they're tied to Bamboo, the rapper who's on the Beat Rock label. And so like what ended up happening is like that did not happen. We had to talk to Dave, and then Bam ended up tapping his own network, and he's been making these projects now. So he's been putting out EPs where he's talked to gangsters, and so like that's what's his current project on Spotify that he keeps releasing. And so like Bam's already doing what I wanted, and I'm like, I hate him for it, but whatever, it's his life. And also
Bam's a homie, yeah.
Bam is the homie. He's like my brother, but like I have a love-hate relationship with him where like every time people come up to him and they're like, oh my God, you're Bamboo, I look at him like, you're just an asshole. Like, I mean, these people love you, but I know you.
That's dope. I love it. Okay, that gives me a lot of ideas. Kat and Tina, we got to rep this East Coast, so we can get these, so we can tell the West Coast about our stories. And so for me, I've been I work in an entertainment industry, and so I know a lot of actors and filmmakers and a lot of PR cats. So I've been booking a lot of those people. But I want to, again, because we wanted to talk about the history. I've been trying to get academics, and we have a couple academics coming on soon. But we also come from the convention community, so I think in a way, like, I know I can get certain cosplayers and photographers that we all know, and Kat and Tina's a known cosplayer in the community and does a lot of promotions. And so it's like they're there. Like, if I feel in a way, like if we need to, or we run out of something, we can easily get them. But like, I've been feeling like approaching it by let's getting these people that'll create awareness for what we're doing. Like, get these main people.
Tap your network, because that's I think what we did early on. We tapped our network, and then as we built momentum, we could then reach out, and then like someone said yes, because like I think early on we were like tapping just all our friends, and then I cold asked, like I tweeted like a Dale Talday from Top Chef. I was like, hey, do you want to do this? Like, and he's like, yes. And I was like, holy shit, he said yes. And so we had him on, and so that was like, we didn't know what we were doing, because it was almost one of those early times where we're like, he's not our friend, so we have to act like professionals. So we were like, oh my God, we have to be professional. So then we figured it out. And then since then, like, you know, we had, when we had Gina Rosero on, it was like just like random, like she's this trans supermodel activist. Like, it was random connections that had happened, and she had just so happened to be in LA, and so we were able to book her. And so that was just like, holy crap. And then I think in that same month we talked to Jose Antonio Vargas, because he was putting out the book Dear America, and I was just like, oh my God, he wrote for Time. He's making Defined America. Like, it was like a snowball effect. And then it was just one of those like I totally like name it to claim it type situation. So we were like, oh, and early on, like before we could get these guests, we wrote, like, there is a Google Doc somewhere, Google spreadsheet with like a list of guests and like dream guests, right? Like, these are the dreams that you can get. So we wrote it down, but like, to be real, I forget where that is. And we just like kind of like snowball, and like the spider web of like connections just get us to where we are. Yeah. Like, to this day, like, I still want to talk to Jessica Hagedorn, and I have put this out there for like to all the people, and we know people who know her, and like there's always been like, we can get you her, and I'm like, oh, but I'm scared. Like, how like oh, she's my hero. Like, I want to grow up and be as cool as her because she rocks that like tita mullet, and she's always fabulous. And
Love it.
I've been in her presence a few times at like book talks, and I'm always like, oh my god. Her. Or like one day, like I want to talk to Joey Santiago, and I was like, Mike, it would be your episode because he's the guitar player, he's a guitarist for the Pixies, and like we are big music nerds and fans, and like I was like, we should talk to him, Mike. You should be the one to lead.
That's
and
too
then Mike said no. Mike was like, he's my hero. I don't want to do it.
Oh man.
But like one day it'll happen.
So then, who's the guest you most want to have on your show, individually? For you, Elaine, and
Good
for you,
question.
Mike. Yeah.
I think for me, like this should be an easy one, but it'd be like, some of our friends in the Philippines who are like in bands out there. Like we were friends with people who are like in the indie rock scene out in the Philippines, and I've been meaning to have them on our show. But just to kind of like the thing that's most fascinated me has been like, helping people here in America understand like Filipino culture that may not be the kind of thing that you see on like the Filipino channel / all the other kind of like cable networks on YouTube or whatever. Like there's a whole like indie culture, artist culture, some of it's hip hop, some of it's rock, but like, like some of the bands out there, like Pupil, the folks who were in Eraserheads, like we know some of them actually, but it's just like, I always get the sense that like there's this disconnect between Filipino and Filipino American culture. Like I always want to kind of try to bridge, even though I didn't really grow up in the Philippines. Like I'm super like excited by like this idea of like this Filipino identity that isn't like the one that we're just used to, like as interpreted through our parents or through TV. That there's a whole cinematic culture. We talked to Marie Jamora a while ago, who's like one of our friends, and she's like a filmmaker from the Philippines, making it out here in America too. Just all those things are just so interesting to me. So I definitely want to have a couple Filipino bands on, and even like have them maybe even perform on our show or something. I don't know the logistics of that these days, and like trying to do that on Zoom is a little tricky, but I mean, I think it's just like, I started a hashtag a couple years ago called like TFAL Hearts OPM. Just because like I think like you think about Filipino culture, like you just think of like certain things like Lea Salonga or whatever, or like Sharon Cuneta or whatever, but there's just so much more, and I want to learn more, and I want people to learn more about it. So
so he created the hashtag, but it also is because it's attached to this. I don't know if you can see it. It's like joy.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's dope.
I think your filter thing is
but it's like Joy Division, and then it looks like the Jolly Bee. Yeah.
Nice.
So this is some of our
Chicken Joy Division.
Joy Division.
Y'all got merch, man.
Merch. We do have merch, and it's hosted at our What a Maneuver store, whatamaneuver.net, and then you can find it. And
I'm gonna have to cop some of that.
It's hilarious that we're on that site because it's technically like a wrestling.
Like pro wrestling tees.
Yeah.
So it's
similar.
a version of pro wrestling. It's like that, but they pay out more. The pro wrestling.
Hey, there we go. Ain't no wrong.
And we heard about it because Chris Wolf, who is a retired professional wrestler, a former guest on the show, she was like, "Oh, I work with these guys. I'll hook you up." And so she like connected us, and they're really great to work with. They're really easy. It's like a small business out of like Nashville. They're really great guys. Super cool. If you want the info, I will definitely hook you up with that. Your own merch for sure. But like, I'm trying to think of my dream guest. I did say Jessica Hagedorn, but like honestly,
wasn't it Batista?
Oh my god, that was.
Yeah.
I do like. I always have like, I want to have all these people, but I would be like really scared. But I think I would like to talk to Dave Bautista, but like, how could you get that? I have no idea.
He's a local cat, and I actually have a connection to him because he shops at this one specific comic shop before he, made it big and left the DC area. And so I'm trying to work that.
Because he lives in Florida now.
Yeah, but he still has his mom. His mom still lives, I think, here in Fairfax, Northern Virginia.
Yes. He claims DC very hard, so that's why I like the DMV area. So I'm like, I would. David, he's gonna be so cool. Just to hear his journey and his story, how he had his falling out with Manny Pacquiao that we all did. But like,
yeah,
like I mean, you know, homophobia. It's hard. It's like a hard
I
life.
felt the same way. I used to be a Manny Pacquiao guy. I used to stand him hard until that came out.
And then that happened.
It was disappointing.
And then when he would train, like he would run from his house in large, like some area, but my commute from my house to work at UCLA,
we would see Manny Pacquiao just running around.
I would see him running, and I'd be like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then when the homophobia came out, I was like, oh, well, you're gonna lose. You're old. Like I was just like, nah. Like no. But Dave Bautista would be great. I like that's like really, really far yet. But I want to talk to like Rocky Rivera off of Beat Rock. She'd be great.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk to Faith, even though we actually know her and I talk to her all the time, but her schedule is so Faith Santia. So Faith Santia is on Ruby Ibarra's Us. She is the one, the spoken word artist who, you know, who everybody like, that's the clip that most people play.
Yeah.
It's Faith's words. And so she's a homie and I want to talk to her about her journey and like.
Yeah, the ironic thing is like there's all these people who are like the homies. We haven't gotten around to talking to them because there's just so many people that like, you know, like we've been randomly getting, but like, yeah, like, have we even talked to Ruby actually? I don't remember.
No.
And yeah.
But
even Bam.
Well, Bam, whatever. We haven't talked to Ruby, but we were in her music video.
Dope.
We were like a random one of their music videos. We were in the background.
Ooh,
but like,
cool.
you know, it would just be nice to talk to people. You know, there are names, right? Like big names like Dave Bautista's and Jessica Hagedorn's. But honestly, like I like talking to folks like you because like I don't know the Virginia experience. Like and like you were saying you're a cosplayer, like that's so cool. Like I have tried to do that shit, but it's hard and expensive and I don't sew. So like I do the whole like the ghetto Disney bound version, which is like I'm gonna embrace the theme of it all. Like I went to because we have Dapper Day out here at Disneyland.
Yeah.
So Dapper Day is like when you get really dressed up and go to the parks, like when
outfits.
And so I one year I Disney bounded at Winnie the Pooh. So my dress was orange and then I had like a red bolero and I wore like a petticoat underneath. And it was like so much fun. But it was like September in California is like hot as shit. And so I was like sweating through my clothes. It was the worst experience. I was like, I don't know how you all do that stuff because I'm like, it's just all powis. Like I was just like, gross, I'm just stinky.
Yeah, cosplay is hard. I don't like it. No, it's great. Like you cosplay at like your level. Like I've made full on sewing costumes and cried. I've also like done closet cosplay where you just put stuff together, and I think like that's more in the spirit of cosplay than like crying at 3 a.m. before a con to do a costume. So
yeah, no.
Level and like cosplay for fun. So you're doing it right.
I mean, I think what will be fascinating is that, you know, there's that series coming out on Netflix. Is it the one about? I mean, like there's like Filipino mythology we were talking about earlier.
Trece.
Isn't it?
Trece.
Yeah, Trece. Yeah, and so like imagining that people showing up as characters from that in the con, right? Mm-hmm. And even like when we interviewed Anthony Francisco, right? Like who's an artist for Marvel and, you know, created Groot like after his son. I mean, it's just like the way that like Filipino culture can start showing up even more so in kind of like con culture, cosplay culture. Like it'll be fun to kind of see that kind of manifest itself, because I think that's something that might show up like, you know, like in like the Asian cons, but like I want to see more of that like in the local ones once we're able to start doing those again.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to like Isa Briones because she's in the new Star Trek on the Picard show. I would love to talk to my cousin because he works on the Star Trek Picard show at Discovery, and just be like, yo, spill all your secrets. Tell us what's happening in the stories. But he's like, no, I signed an NDA.
Yeah. Yo, Elaine, because I again, because you're a wrestling fan, I'm actually I this past year, year and a half. I used to be a deep wrestling fan, but got back into it again because the women's division are amazing. My daughter loves Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch, and as does my wife.
I have the legit boss key, the rings. I have those.
Oh, dope! Yeah, my daughter actually was Sasha Banks Halloween contest champion last year. And she did the whole thing. My wife made the jacket and all of that. It was super cool. But speaking of wrestling, a Filipino wrestler that I really want to have is Shotzi Blackheart. I was curious if you're a fan of Shotzi, and also
great.
Sasha's husband, Mike Aze. I am Mike Aze.
Filipino?
Yeah, he and makes all of Sasha's costumes. So I really want to get him on.
So we've talked to Shotsky.
Oh, dope.
Oh, well, not on the show.
Okay.
So when she was out in California, because she was actually based up in the Bay in a different promotion, but she would come down and do this promotion that no longer exists. It was called Bar Wrestling. It got caught up in the Joey Ryan controversy of it. Also, it stopped. It does no longer. But she came out and did those shows all the time. So we would see her at shows, and we have. So when you go to our, oh no, it's not going to be there. Early on, there's a shirt that we don't sell anymore. It's like limited edition. It's called Bullet Club. And so we did 4 or 5 runs of the shirt, and we gave them to
Club, like Balut?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, dope.
But like Bullet Club, but Balut Club. Yeah.
I don't have anything in here right now. And so we stopped. We retired the shirt. It no longer exists.
Damn.
I have a picture of it. It's right here.
Aw.
I don't think it's it.
Super dope.
But we gave, when we would go to this wrestling promotion at the AFW hall, we would give it to wrestlers that were Filipino. So we gave Shotsky a shirt. We gave Chris Wolf a shirt. She's now retired. We gave one to B-Boy, who is a wrestler out of San Diego, and he was on Lucha Underground. We mailed one to this guy. His name is like Joaquin Phoenix now on WWE on NXT.
Oh, okay. I know who you're talking about.
Promotion. Yeah, so we sent him one. We gave one to TJP as well. And so he was like really big, but like I kind of like that's tapered off because he kind of like went a little like
he's super conservative.
Yeah, and I was just like,
I was all about TJP until I was like seeing him do all these Trump posts. I'm like, nah, I can't.
And then it was just like, oh,
yeah.
like you were cool, and then I'm like, no, I can't.
I feel you.
I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. But yeah, so we had that, and Shotsky was one of the people, and she is like, so she's really dope. She'd be great to have. I love her and her green hair, and her pizza lovingness, and her little.
She's into cosplay. I think she would be totally like our vibe. That's awesome. So this Filipino American Life, Elaine, Mike, where do you see so we talked about some guests, we talked about how it all came together. Where do you see that you want to take this, and what advice do you get to us that are kicking it off and trying to create our own path?
I mean, I think
before pandemic, we were doing this thing. We had this goal where we were going to travel to cities where Filipino American communities were and talk to the people in these communities. So we've done a few travel shows. So like we did one in Vegas, we did one in San Francisco, San Diego,
Seattle,
and Vancouver. So before the pandemic, we actually were set to go to Houston. And we were going to talk to Filipino Americans out in Houston. And then the pandemic, literally, we were going to be there like March 25th or something like that, and then shutdown happened the 13th, and we're like, oh, our flight's canceled, we can't do this. So I think we want to continue to do that. I mean, given COVID and whatnot, like we can do the Zoom stuff, so it's great because we've actually talked to all these people that we would never have been able to talk to before. Like Lorenzo would have been impossible because he's in Hawaii, like there is no way, but we do it now via Zoom. But I do want to go to Houston because it's different when you're in the city and you're in the room and you get to see
the vibe,
city.
Yeah,
you totally get the vibe. So I want to do that. I want to go to Houston. I want to go to Chicago. We want to go to Virginia Beach. Like it was on our radar.
We would love to do like mutual, and we know so many cons. We can definitely put that together. So if y'all come this way, we got you. We making that happen.
Yes. And like Island, I think another thing that a goal is to like do a live show with an audience, and like, because that was like something like one of our goals, and we were like, well, let's see how we do this, and we've tested the waters, like being able to be a part of things and just be like, it's not like we were the ticket sale, you know, like we weren't the headliner of the event, but one day to be able to do it, because Mike actually was in the DMV area and talked to Malika Garib, and like when she was still out there, and like, didn't Malika tell you, Mike, like you should also
she was like here. I mean, yeah, every time we go to a place, like, and we meet folks, like, they're always like, you know, there is a Filipino community, a Filipino scene out here, and like, you know, if you guys could just do something like a live show or something, like, I mean, people would come. And I don't have those sense of those things until I come out to those communities, and it's just like, you know, people, and speaking of like what we were saying earlier about kind of like West Coast LA privilege, like, we're just, I mean, we live in historic Filipino town. I can go outside and I'll hear Tagalog just being spoken walking down the street, you know, and realizing, you know, as we've done the show, that like that is not the experience of other folks out there. Like, we do want to kind of come out and kind of bring, you know, our experiences to kind of have those dialogues and conversations and just learn from the community. I think like after Houston, like coming back to kind of like the DMV area was on the radar. I think we've talked about like we need to go out to Jersey and New York, Toronto, one day maybe the Philippines. Yeah, Jacksonville. Like, I mean, there's like these pockets of Filipino communities that like, I think Chicago was on there too. Yeah. And so like, I think, depending on how things kind of shake out, if that has to be on Zoom, it has to be on Zoom. But yeah, like definitely going out to the communities and meeting folks. Like when I did DC, like I just happened to be there for a work conference. Okay. And I just met up with folks, and we ended up going to like all these different random places and talking to people. And I was like, man, I need more time to kind of like just get a feel for like what's actually happening out here. Virginia Beach is definitely on the radar. So, you know, I think we wanted to go to like London or like random places where like Filipinos are and like that have reached out and we're like, hey, we're here. I'm like, oh shit. Oh, and I want to go to like Australia, like because there are like big pockets there. And so just like know what that's like. And then eventually, I mean, the gag, like the running joke was like, we wanted the Department of Tourism Philippines to fund us to go to the Philippines. And it would be
I'm
like,
trying to work on that right now.
Right? And it'd be like, hey, Elaine's never been to the Philippines. Let's go. Da-da-da-da. Like, we're going to try and like finagle that. But like, I'm not going to go there. It's a pandemic. Also, I don't do it. He's like, you know, the Filipino version of Trump. So like, no, thank you. No, ma'am. Yeah, true. True. And so I was going to wait like till that situation gets better before we could even entertain such an issue of like going out there. But that would be like a dream to do, to like go out there. Yeah.
Oh,
and I mean, it'd be awesome if we could like, hook up with you guys and just do like a co-podcast in person, you know?
Hell yeah.
Right?
Like we did that when we went to Vegas, like with the Bruja Baddies, and like we just basically like had a joint episode together. And I mean, I want to meet all the other folks who are doing stuff like this, because I mean, I think like when you bring all this perspective together and like really tell like a bigger story about like our experiences, I mean, like it just, I think, helps to motivate other folks to do the same. And I think that ultimately is not necessarily the goal of the podcast, but I think the best part of it is that people are feeling like, I love the fact that people are telling the story. Like, I want to tell my story too, and add to kind of like the documentation of what it means to be of your community and culture. So
exactly.
Advice, Mike, what advice do you have?
I mean, don't ask me. I'm going to tell you to buy a bunch of equipment and like set up a home studio and like all this other stuff.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, go for it. What's your question?
Go ahead, Kat.
I specifically wanted to ask Elaine something before we wrapped anything up, which was just, you know, it's so great to kind of see like a Filipina kind of being the representation, especially when you were telling the podcast story and you were like, they needed a girl. And so I know it can be super hard. I mean, it seems like even a lot of the things that are kind of pop culture-y, they're like, it's like the dancing in the cars and it's all the stuff that guys do. Whereas like, you know, there's this kind of double standard where good Filipino girls, you know, they go to Catholic school and they behave themselves and then they get married one day. But then like the guys are the ones kind of making the moves and the shakes and being out in front. And so like you are not doing that. And that's so great. So what kind of advice can you give, you know, us, Ates, trying to...
So my advice is just to own your shit, because like at the end of the day, like as much as the guys are in the front, Mike knows the way the Filipino American community works out here, or in general, it's always a woman running the show. Like straight up, there's always a woman who's handling it, has all their shit together, because the guy that's the face, so that's like, you know, literally a team, like face man, like he's just good at face, right? But there's always a George Papard like woman in the background, like running everything.
Right.
So I would say like own it, and like and just be like, yo, if you're not gonna listen to me, then fuck you. We're not gonna entertain you. I think that's been something that I try and sit in, because it's like, oh, people may reach out and they're like, hey, do you want to do this or that or the other? And it's just like, no, I don't. Like, I don't care. Like we get pitched a lot of things. And so like, you're going to learn, you're going to be like, oh, maybe like, sure, let's check this out. Right. But then at the end of the day, like you go with your gut and you go with your vibe and whatnot. And like, not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to.
Yes.
Like, I'm not gonna. I know that I have a talent for picking what's the next big thing and what's gonna be hot and what's gonna be good. And so, if only people listen to me, you would learn this shit. Like legit, like with this organization, I pitched them to do a We Bear Bears panel, because it's a like visual communications is like a Pan-Asian film and TV arts organization. And this was early on. And I said, you need to get the creator, he's Korean American, on and talk about this show. And then the person that I was pitching it to was just like, oh, that's funny. Yeah, like a Cartoon Network show. What happened a year later? The shit blew up. And I was like, look, I fucking told you, you should have gotten them on the ground. Get in on the ground, and then you'll go from there. Like with Shotsky, like we've known her since like the indie days, right? If you're in there in the ground, you can then get them later on. And so I say, own whatever your lane is and own it, and be like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, you can look at me like, oh, you're just a girl, oh, you're just a woman, you don't know. But like, no, I do know. Like, screw you. Like, I know this shit. I'm running in my business. I'm running this podcast. I'm doing whatever it is I need to get done. And like, lean on your other sisters, because like I love that there's the two of you. That's really dope. I may be the only female voice on the show like regularly, but there is a crew of women that basically help the TFAL team, like Girly Colado, a resident reality checker who is Joe's boss, aka wife, and then Kat Carito Bonds, who has helped us in the past and was a fill-in while Joe was on maternity leave. Allison Delacruz, who we said in the past, who is a performance artist and has been a guest in the past, and she's gonna launch her own podcast called Trek Table, and it's about Star Trek Discovery. So if you want to talk to her,
you should hook up with her.
I would definitely bring that on board. If you are all about Star Trek, she knows her stuff. And like, these are just like, these three women are like the strongest women out there. And like, literally, like, I would have them in a fight, in a scrap any day of the week. Like, I would rather have them than Joe and Ryan, because Ryan would run and Joe would be like, Joe would try and like negotiate it out, like mediate it, like, we don't need a fight. And then I would be like, where's the Vaseline? I'm gonna fucking like where are my brass knuckles? Let's go. And so like, but that is just like literally like that meme of like the little cat, where it was just like, they're like ready to fight, like, I'm gonna run in. It's like literally like, this is every Filipina that you've ever met. Filipino American. Like, you cross them, they're gonna be like, no, bitch, I'm gonna cut you. So yeah, that's my advice. My advice is to just yell, no, bitch, I'm gonna cut you, and then move on your way.
Yes. Keys to being a prominent Filipina. I'm out. I'm all about it.
Awesome. Sing ates, man, for real. That's that's why I wanted these two ladies involved with me. Is I do a lot of other podcasts, and it's all a lot of guys, and so I'm like, I want this to have that female representation, because I've been raised with nothing but strong women, and so I needed two strong women. So I'm very thankful for my ates. But
yeah, Creepy has been awesome to work with. Like, he really treat, like, we're a partnership here, and it feels really good and valued, because I know that we have definitely had experiences with projects where we were not. And this has been a breath of fresh air, and it's been really great.
That's awesome.
I love it. Well, I thank you for being a guest on our show. I gotta pitch it to Joe and Ryan to see if we can flip it, and then you can be then you can.
And then we can talk to you guys more about like our.
I want to learn about your cosplay journey. I want to know about the convention stuff, because that's just been my dream. Like Mike knows, like I wouldn't like San Diego Comic-Con is the big one out here. And like, you know, like getting tickets to that is probably the equivalent of getting tickets to like the New York one. And so I was like, it's like impossible, right? Yeah. And so I was invited to be on a panel last year, and that was just like, oh my God, this is a dream. Like we're here. At Comic-Con, at the Comic-Con, and I was just like, oh my God. And I like freaked out and I nerded out. And then Mike was like, Mike understood, but then Joe and Ryan were like, what is this? Like,
we can definitely get on some nerd shit with you, Elaine. Totally. All about the nerd shit.
I was just like freaking out. Like, I get to go to Comic-Con also for free. Hell yeah.
So speaking of, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
So speaking of which, one of the things before we sign off is we do a nerd check, and basically what you're nerd about. It doesn't have to be like the traditional nerd sense of like, you know, Marvel or DC or whatever, but like, what is something, how did you put it? You said something good last time, Kat or Tina, of like, it's a...
You can give a TED talk on, but it has to be nerdy. Like what are you the expert? You were the expert nerd on.
A super nerd about.
I think I know Elaine's answer, but
what's my answer, Mike? Because I have too many things.
I mean, it's either going to be wrestling or
it's not.
You know more than anybody. Well, okay, I'll say what mine is, and it would be like vintage, completely outdated electronics. Okay. Because you probably can't see it from here, but there's like a Laserdisc player right here, and there's usually a VCR right here, and I also have a reel-to-reel tape player over here and an 8-track, and I nerd out on that stuff. I kind of do all this research, like what's the best laser in a Laserdisc player, or like what is the best way to play old school cassette tape. And you know, obviously I have the turntables, and I have some other turntables around here. I'm just like fascinated. I'll go to like the thrift store, look up different formats of like VHS tapes. And be like, oh, I'll have like 4 VCRs or like Betamax players or whatever. Betamax, yes. You know? I mean, it's just like I at first it was like I want to get like those movies that only exist in that. Like, there's a movie that might be in Laserdisc, but it was never released anywhere. Yeah, and there's like I have Betamax tapes in a box up here that was just like never put on VHS. There's no reason for me to have these things. I can find all this shit on YouTube probably, but just the idea that I can find a thing that like you'll never find anywhere else is just it's just a fun thing for me. So
yeah. I definitely had Betamax growing up. I definitely have like a handful of like childhood tapes. Lady Lovely Locks, I think I had only on Betamax. I don't even know if they released it any other way, but I had like the whole series. It was important.
Yeah, I think I have like Muppet Babies or something on Betamax, just randomly. Like, Care Bears movies.
Muppet cartoons was my joint.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Elaine. Like, do you think it's would it be Babysitters Club? I mean, you had a whole podcast on that. I'm impressed.
I think you should do that on TikTok. Like, I would watch.
Yeah, 60 seconds.
It's hard. It's so hard. I can't figure it out. I just like to go down the hole and just watch. I mean, I guess I could do that. Like, to be honest, I am like a Jane of all trades in that, like, the moment I see something that's interesting, I will. It's like Filipinos and ice skating during the Olympics. Like all of a sudden you become like an expert, like, right? Like immediately, even though you don't know anything about ice skating, but you're like, how dare she try that triple axel into a double sow cow? She did not, like, you don't know that, but like for some reason during the Olympics, everyone becomes an expert. So like, I have phases of pop culture where all of a sudden I'm all about it. Like for a short term, it was We Bare Bears. For a while, it was Adventure Time. Like I went as like Jake one time for Halloween. And then right now it's like everything. And then right now it's like Baby Yoda. Like I love it's my guy right now, even though he ate a bunch of eggs.
I know, right?
That was so sad.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert if you watched it. But I would probably say like it wrestling between the eras of 2016 and 2020 because like that, because that's when I came back to wrestling, and like I specifically like New Japan Pro wrestling, I guess I could probably talk about it because like I took a picture with Rainmaker Kazuchi Okada and it was like the highlight of my entire life. Even better than getting married. It was like I got to touch Okada and I was just like, oh my god. If you look
I believe it.
He's a very beautiful man. But or just like random 80s shit because like I grew up on television. I learned how to tell time based on the schedule of the TV.
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched like the Andy Griffith Show, I Love Lucy, Who's the Boss, every sitcom imaginable, Silver Spoons.
I mean, my clock was the Disney afternoon, so DuckTales is on. Oh, it's time to get ready for
I can
dinner.
tell you about Animaniacs and Tiny Toons, all that type of shit. I mean, like Pokemon, I only know first gen. Like I could not tell you anything beyond that. But like, so like, I just would be like, I just want to like, I couldn't tell you everything about Marvel or DC because like that is like beyond me. Like I would just be like, no, I would just be like hodgepodge random shit. Pop culture.
I love the jack of all trades. That's a really cool way of putting it.
Yeah, because you know, like pop culture goes in phases. Like things get really hot. Like Steven Universe had its moment, and then, I mean, it's still around, but like you know what I mean. Like it's
but it's not peak anymore.
But it's not peaky, right? Like I love Foster's like
Home of Imaginary Friends.
Jed's like I love that shit. Like the fact that when they were on the Macy's Day Parade and they were there and Rick Astley came and did Never Gonna Give You Up and no one understood what was happening. I remember watching that with Mike going, this is the best thing in the universe. I would probably do a TED talk about why that was important and how that like people don't understand that this random show from Cartoon Network infused a little bit of brevity into a dumb like Thanksgiving Day Parade about balloons. Like, come on, like that would be my TED talk. I'm just claiming it right now.
Awesome. I love it. Oh.
Awesome. This has been wonderful. You guys, again, we feel like we know you, and that's kind of like the wild thing with podcasts when you like when I start my day at the office, like I turn you guys on and I'm because again, I just, recently, in the past couple months, started, tuning into you guys I've been listening to new episodes every day and it's like, you feel like you know them and you're very relatable and your relationship between the two of you. Oh, this producer Mike and I'm Elaine and I love because y'all the couple on the show. It's a lot of fun and I can't thank you enough for joining us and the amazing Ates. Before we sign off, can we get your socials? And while you guys say it, I'm gonna throw it onto the screen so they can follow you either individually or just beyond just TFAL.
At TFAL Podcast on Instagram and Twitter, and This Filipino American Life on Facebook.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right. Thank you guys. Kat and Tina, anything you want to say before we sign off with them?
Thanks so much for coming out. We learned a lot. It was a lot of fun.
Chit-chatting with us.
And hopefully we can hook up again.
Yeah, hopefully you guys will be on our show. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you
Appreciate
guys.
you guys.
Thanks so much.
Boom. There you go. That was the amazing Elaine Dolalas and Michael Nailat from TFAL. Really appreciate them coming on and hopefully we can have a extended relationship with us being, I guess, the East Coast version of TFAL with the ShoPowSho. Ladies, what did you think of that convo with Michael and Elaine?
It was really cool. It was really cool, like listening to their podcast and then being able to talk to them. So it was like, I don't know, like when you're so used to just hearing their voices and then you get to actually like talk directly to them. It was cool. It was like crossing the veil.
Yeah, it was really cool to talk to somebody who's been doing what we've been doing for a lot longer and kind of, she's the ate.
Yeah, she's the ate. And she gave some bitchin' advice.
Like ladies, like again, I hope this is a partnership. I've been trying to express to you guys. I don't want y'all to feel like I'm running the show or whatever, and kicking off. I want it to be a partnership.
You're in charge at all.
Wow.
I don't mind that because again, this is, I have a love for my culture, and then I wanted to find other people, especially ladies, again, because like I said to Elaine, I've been doing a lot of conventions or a lot of podcasts with other gentlemen. I want this representation because again, I have a little girl who I want her to like look up to you guys and see that you guys are all about this and owning who you are. And that's what I think you all are, as positive females and role models. And, you know, let's do it for the people and for the culture. And that's, you know, I want this collaboration to keep going. And so just everything she said, I really hope you all take it to heart. And I know you guys are, you know, gonna rock and roll with it. And man, what they're doing and what I know we can do, let's kick that ball and keep running with it and make it happen, man. The future's so bright, and I'm just so inspired, and then having you all and with the team, and you know, this is therapeutic in a way as well. Yes. Love you guys. So, another great episode, man.
Another great episode in the books. I'm just more excited for things that we're doing in the future. The more of these we do, just feels like we're really getting into our stride, and I really love it.
Love it. So let's tell them how they can find us online if they want to, you know, chime in to us individually on things that they want to see, and, you know, hit us up in the comments, all of that, you know, so we know how we can also pattern what we're giving, because again, this is for the community. Y'all are part of this community, so we want to, you know, do this show for you guys, so you guys can help dictate that. So please let us know. So tell us how they can find you guys online, Twitter, IG.
And you want to see more,
Hey,
you can find me on Instagram at
Valentina. Hey, Tina, you froze for a second. So go ahead, start up again. It froze on me. Go ahead.
Well, if you hate cosplay like me and you want to see more, you can follow me on Instagram at viva.valentina. TikTok is the same, viva.valentina, if you want to see my other side project, which is repairing stuffed animals, and very satisfying before and afters repair videos.
I am Cataphoric at you can find me same name under Instagram or for Twitter.
Love it. Love you guys. I am Kuya P, aka Patrick Michael Strange. You can find me at Strange Since 1977 and at Temple Far East, as well as the ShoPowSho and the Nerds of Color and New Release Wednesday. We got a lot of content that we're gonna bring you guys. Our next episode will be from CW's The 100, and upcoming for this Christmas movie time frame. Everybody does the holiday movies. He has a movie called Operation Christmas Drop. He is Xavier de Guzman. He is gorgeous. He has flowing hair. He will be my Lapu Lapu in the Battle of Mactan story. I can't wait to do that movie, and I love him. He's an awesome guy. And thank you all so much. Mahal kita. Salamat. We out of here. Deuces.